Chapter 91, Come you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 91. Come after the discussion, they finally entered the field, facing each other. In front of Aaliyah stood tall Sihan with a serious expression. Meanwhile, Pharaoh released his killing intent and locked them to Hantar and Theo simultaneously, trying to pressure them. I'm sorry, Aaliyah. But this is how it is. Ellen smiled apologetically. I need to defeat you this round. Benov calm. Aaliyah narrowed her eyes and shook her head. No. The winner is me. This statement made Ellen confused. It seemed Theo had another good plan in his head, but she decided not to pry it further. Instead, she said, let's start then. Suddenly, Aaliyah made a small smile before Theo snapped his finger as a signal. Aaliyah and Hantar turned around and ran toward a certain spot in the room. As if they had predicted this movement, Sihan and Pharaoh followed Hantar and Aaliyah as they were more important than Theo. I'm sorry, but you're not going anywhere. After watching your previous match, I know that you will do this type of strategy. Pharaoh smiled and raised both his short swords. Meanwhile, Sihan took a deep stance and said with a cold tone, You're not going to pass me. Aaliyah smiled once again and shouted, Start. Theo turned around and acted as he was one step late to do this despite his planning mind like their previous match. This action already forced Ellen to shift her focus to Aaliyah and Sihan first. Come here. I will handle both of you. Pharaoh was sure that their plan was to have Aaliyah by enough time, so these two could kill him, but as one of the top people among the second-grade students, he had pride that wouldn't lose against this guy. He raised his short swords before lightning covered the blades, sparking left and right. Hantar quickly released the same wind that he used during their previous match, but he didn't let it burst to create chaos this time. Pharaoh slashed downwards. Clink. The clicking sound echoed in everyone's ears, but more importantly, Theo was forced to take one big step to the left because the lightning bounced off and ran through the ground, trying to electrocute him. Oh, you can avoid it. Pharaoh smirked. Theo remained silent and never thought Pharaoh could direct the residual force of his lightning magic. Although he had seen his master doing it, he just never expected Pharaoh to be able to do the same. He became even more cautious and proceeded by thrusting his spear from as far as he could. Of course, he had used his focus charge to amplify his power like how both of them covered their swords with wind and lightning. Pharaoh tilted his head to the left and found Theo swinging his spear to slit his neck, so Pharaoh used his other sword to stop that movement. Hantar took one step forward and used all his strength in that one swing, releasing all the wind he had stored. Theo retreated slightly while raising his shield, blocking the wind. Elemental shield. Albeit, Pharaoh seemed to be awfully familiar with their movement as he turned around and looped behind Theo to get his shield's protection while slashing his neck. Theo prevented this swing by using his spear, glanced to the right and clicked his tongue. For magic, free to go. What he meant by for magic was how many times Ellen had released her magic to Aaliyah. He planned to use it as a countdown for his ambush. Despite being such a jerk, you have pretty sharp movement. Are you hiding something? Pharaoh's senses were tingling. As someone who got a blessing from a certain werewolf, his senses instinctively picked something from the others' bodies. And he had this familiarity when he saw him, even though he didn't remember Theo. After all, there might be another reason why Aaliyah wanted to team up with this guy. He might be someone from a fallen family that was so close to the Ulrich family. Hence, he tried to recall where he had met this guy. Unfortunately for him, the hesitation that slightly appeared in his eyes became Theo's best chance to strike back. He spun his body and sent a kick from the side. Because of the wrist's positions, Pharaoh could only use his arm to block the attack that launched him to the wall, where Hantar prepared to use everything in his repertoire to stall him in this corner. Bam! Ellen released another ice magic as it rang sweetly in Theo's ears. He had been waiting for this moment. 7 skills. It's time. Theo's eyes brightened as he turned around. His feet glowed in green color as his speed increased exponentially. Ellen should have many E-rank skills, and each of them had a weakness that forced her to not be able to use it continuously. Hence, after the 7 skills, which he believed the most reasonable number, where she only had 3 skills to use, to which 2 skills were the correction number in case she used it forcefully. If it were only a magician at the same level and had 5 skills to use, he should have enough chance to kill her. Firil realized the sudden change in Theo, saw his back, and found his true target. He shouted, "Oi, Ellen woman! He has been hiding his strength and is targeting you. Be careful." Ellen was surprised because she was too focused on Aaliyah. Unfortunately for her, the moment her focus returned to Theo, the latter already closed their distance and thrust his spear. Clink. She luckily managed to react and redirect that thrust by using her metallic staff. However, her expression remained calm even in this situation. No, she, in fact, could still joke around. Ahaha, a bad guy who lies this whole time. How cute. Let this big sister teach you something. She smiled before Theo experienced excruciating pain on his stomach, finding Ellen's foot already struck him on his abdomen before blowing him 20 feet away. Theo clenched his teeth and raised his vision, looking at Ellen, who was still smiling, but there was only one word to describe her smile this time. It was terrifying, as if everything he would do from now on was useless. Come here. For the first time in this match, Ellen released her killing intent and locked Theo. Chapter 92, Showdown. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 92. Showdown. Theo. Aaliyah shouted as she stomped the ground and charged forward. As someone responsible for stopping Aaliyah, Sihan took one step to the right and made a small swing to block her off completely. If it were in the real world, Sihan obviously had no chance of stopping her. However, the virtual world was different. Working in the same condition and having the same level, Sihan completely read her movement and matched it to the very detail, preventing her from taking another step forward. Unfortunately for him, Aaliyah's eyes caught his plan. She halted her movement, struck Sihan's sword, and used the force from his swing to help her spin her body. Spin. Sihan widened his eyes in surprise, looking at Aaliyah moving in the opposite direction. This was the same move she pulled during the first fight when Aaliyah showed her fighting style to Theo. However, Sihan was not a monster. He had enough reaction speed to take one deep step to the ground and launched himself in the opposite direction, pushing her to the side with her shield. If our levels were not the same, you might have passed me just now. Unfortunately for you. KH. Aaliyah clenched her teeth as she kept moving with small steps so as not to fall because of the force. As someone who didn't know to give up, Aaliyah kept pushing forward until she managed to do it. Feeling the push got lighter, Sihan hurriedly spun his body and sent another swing toward her. The swing threw her off as it came from her blind spot and appeared in her vision right before it hit her. Aaliyah managed to block the sword, but the force also pushed her a few steps back. Sihan released his killing intent and said with a cold tone, "You're not going anywhere." Aaliyah frowned while glancing back and forth between Sihan and Theo, worrying the latter. She just hoped Theo was able to fight against her best friend. At least, until she killed this Sihan who didn't want to budge. Hantar also had a similar situation with Firil. Firil actually allowed Hantar to help Theo, but the opening was none other than the traps he devised. The moment he slipped past him and helped Theo, it was the time for Firil to deliver the killing blow. Hence, Hantar stopped his motion and stayed where he was. While those two remained in their position, Theo had risen from the ground, staring at Ellen with squinted eyes. He recounted the earlier attack before sighing. "Oh. You're not coming." Ellen remained calm and offered him a gentle smile. Her eyes slightly widened, but they were still the same uninterested eyes. She simply said, "Since you managed to surprise me, I will show you something amazing in this fight. Also, please don't underestimate magicians by attacking them without a plan. Nowadays, magician is someone who wields magic while maintaining their own life, not the same as magic throwers in the past. Theo frowned, understanding what she said. She indirectly implied that magicians needed to be able to protect themselves by learning martial arts. Coupled with their magic, they were like an impenetrable fortress. And this was the first time Theo fought a full-fledged magician unlike Shella in the past. He took a deep breath and raised his spear. His haste was still in motion, so he planned to use it to the utmost limit while searching for an opening. Ellen raised her staff and summoned 3 palm-sized translucent blue ice lotuses above his head. Bloom, ice lotus. Theo once again realized that she had been buying time this whole time. Because of the position, Theo took one big step backward and watched the lotuses hit the ground, blooming. They literally expanded. With the width of 2 people for each lotus and the height of 10 feet, Theo needed to go around the lotuses to charge toward Ellen. Yet, when he was about to move to the side, he heard Hantar calling for his name. Theo. Right. Theo turned around and saw Firil's blade almost reach him. Luckily, he held his spear on the right, so he planted the spear on the ground and stopped the attack with the handle. The force completely died because the ground acted as his second hand, but the combination attack had yet to end. 5 crystals, the size of a human head, revolved on top of Ellen's head. When she waved her hand to the side, the 5 crystals released their ice power straight toward Theo. The latter quickly moved to the side and hid behind the ice lotuses, making them all slip past him. He then decided to go in the opposite direction, running away from Firil. Seeing Theo move around the lotuses, Ellen smiled and looked at him with a calm, composed look. In Theo's mind, he already counted the magic she used. With the additional 2, there was only 1 magic left she could use before waiting for a while to use it again. Hence, he tried to reach her as quickly as possible. I can cover the distance between us within 3 seconds. As long as I look out for her last magic, I should be fine. Theo frowned and kept running. Not wanting Theo to reach her, she summoned 4 crystal-shaped glowing blue lights, 2 on the right side and 2 on the left side. Ice Star. The 4 lights flew straight to Theo in a more spread way, hoping one of them would hit him. But Theo already predicted such an attack would come and stomped the ground with his right foot before turning his body to the left. With force he accumulated in that right foot, he launched himself to the side, avoiding those blue lights. As expected. Everything is according to the plan. Theo couldn't help but make a small smile as there was nothing between them anymore. Even if she had some martial arts, he had his own confidence he could beat her in close combat. I will kill her. Sadly, Theo himself might be pretty good in a fight, yet, there was one thing that differentiated the first year student and third year student. Trick. He indeed managed to defeat Lost and won the last match, but all of them were still first year students. Tricks alone wouldn't be able to let him go far in battle. And this was the reason why his master wanted him to seal the clone and magic bullet again. Only by overcoming this ordeal could Theo become even stronger. And the difference between them was. Wait, Theo. Stop. Chapter 93, Experience. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 93. Experience. Wait, Theo. Stop. Haunter's voice resounded in the field, warning Theo about his current situation. Yet, at the same time, his concern became his nightmare as he dropped his guard for a split second. For a master assassin like Firil, this split second was the difference between life and death. He waved his sword diagonally in order to kill Hantar, but the latter managed to react, albeit barely. He dropped to the ground before launching himself to the side, leaving his left hand behind. Hantar didn't feel any pain in the virtual world, but he was covered in sweat. This was the worst case scenario. You've let your guard down. Fyril made an excited smirk as he raised his swords for another swing. Meanwhile, Theo was currently on the ground, laying on his belly. A huge piece of ice crystal stuck on his back, pinning him down. KH. Theo gritted his teeth and recalled what happened a few seconds earlier. When he heard Haunter's voice, everything went blank due to the freezing ice that numbs his senses and brain. The next thing he realized, he was already on the ground without being able to move his body. It turned out Ellen could control her own magic to move according to her bidding. The spread shot earlier was just bait for him to show his back to her magic. The two on the right would turn around if he indeed came after her from the right, while the left did the same in the opposite direction. Haunter realized it at the last second and called him to stop because the path in the middle would be cleared soon, but he couldn't respond to him even with his action, reducing him to this state. Due to the damage the body sustained, his vision became blurry as his consciousness was about to be transported back. Before dying, Ellen actually came to him and bent her knees, patting his head a few times while saying, "You have talent, Theodore Griffith. You've made me believe it. Unfortunately, what you're lacking is experience. I don't know if you have realized it or not, but your movement is too straightforward even with your tricks. Tricks can indeed surprise a person, but when they've prepared for it, your advantage will be gone, especially with your current movement. Keep getting stronger. I believe in you." Listening to those words, Theo's vision finally went blank. He arrived inside a pitch-black room, floating as if there was no gravity. In this place, he felt empty as if there were no thoughts other than the battle earlier. He recounted Ellen's advice from word to word and lamented his failure. "I see. Experience, huh? I have once again failed. I have been too complacent with my own progress even though most of my experiences came from the monsters. As for my fights against humans, there were only 3 attempts. The first was my fight against Lost. Back then, I managed to beat him by using tricks, but he was unaware of my tricks. Then, the second one was with Shella and Eric. Due to my sudden power up, I destroyed them. But he suddenly realized what he lacked in the fight against the assassins from the Lang family. Ah. So, that's how it was. I managed to kill several assassins due to their carelessness. They must not have enough experience to be that careful, allowing me to kill them. It was different when the captain joined the battle. He literally reacted to everything I threw at him and almost killed me. Even the way they moved was vastly different. Theo regretted why he didn't notice it sooner. He then remembered his master's restriction about his clone and magic bullet. The reason was actually not him being too reliant on them. Instead, she simply wanted Theo to lose once to understand this important problem. And the greater the setback, the easier for him to find his fault. With him losing this battle, he would most likely lose Aaliyah and had a low chance of getting into the competition. It looked cruel, but when he thought his master didn't want him to learn this with the result of him dying in real life, everything looked so insignificant. I have truly messed up. Theo let out a long sigh. After knowing what I lack, Master wants me to continue trying to reach the opportunity. This hurdle is her test for me to overcome. The only problem will be, can I do it? The answer is simple. Theo couldn't help but smile. Losing was hard and sad for him. Not having Aaliyah in her team would lower his probability to reach it, but it didn't mean they had no chance. He would quickly reinforce his relationship with Haunter and understand him better, so they could win in the next round. We don't need to be embarrassed when we lose. We can go into depression after experiencing it. But what we absolutely need to do after that is to rise again and keep trying. I believe this situation is still salvageable. Theo found a new determination and a thought pattern after understanding today's loss. He would use this experience in all his future fights. Light suddenly came to his eyes and blinded him. It soon dimmed down and he had returned to reality. He sighed in regret, "Still, I've lost. I wonder if Master actually wanted me to drop out of school, so I could follow her instead of going to the international stage. He opened his capsule with a sad expression. Hantar and Aaliyah both looked down, feeling dejected. They knew Aaliyah would probably leave the team and there was nothing they could do to change the result. Knowing the reason they lost was him, Theo lowered his head and apologized. Everything was my fault. I'm sore, Theo. Before he finished his apology, Aaliyah stopped him. She gritted her teeth and grabbed his shoulders. Her hands were shaking as she looked at him in the eyes, saying, I will try to stop them for 2 weeks. You need to get me back from them, okay? Theo only closed his eyes because it might not be possible. He let out a long sigh before the screen showed them the other team's decision. On the screen, there was a picture, a name, and an instruction. However, the picture was not female, but male. The name was not Aaliyah, but Theodore Griffith. Everyone in the room was utterly shocked and they saw this announcement. All the assumptions were broken down by this one decision. It said, Theodore Griffith is chosen as the 4th team member. Congratulations. Now go to room B.022 to meet your new teammates. Chapter 94, Reason you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 94. Reason room B.022. Sihan frowned upon the sudden change of choice while Ellen raised her eyebrows, opening her lazy eyes slightly wider. This. Ellen gently stroked her cheek while making a weird expression. She simply didn't know what to say since Aaliyah was the right choice for their 4th member. Yet, Firil actually chose Theo over Aaliyah. She wondered whether Firil wanted them to lose or something. But she couldn't brush Theo's potential off that easily either. Hence, she asked, Firil. Did you choose the wrong person? Sihan also glanced over, trying to find the answer. You said something good about him, but you seem to have no intention of getting him. I wonder what is wrong with your head. Well, in fact, it seems you are only proud of your own experience instead of your head, eh? Firil snorted. Ellen squinted her eyes and asked with a serious expression. What do you mean? You haven't seen all his tricks yet. Firil shook his head helplessly, feeling slightly disappointed. Why did you finish the battle with him as quickly as possible? If you wanted to say something about his experience, you might as well show it to him first. Ellen narrowed her eyes and replied, the only way to prevent any surprising trick from killing me, I needed to defeat him as soon as possible. Exactly. I'm afraid this guy's tricks are much higher level. After all, he could reveal his power to turn around the situation in the match before us, yet, he chose to hide it until the previous fight. Why? Because he planned to win the next match. Everything was just a build-up for him. Firil shook his head. Ellen closed her eyes for a few seconds before staring at the door. Knock. Knock. Come in, Firil shouted, ignoring them. Theo then pushed open the door and showed himself. He didn't go to them immediately as he still couldn't understand why they would pick him. Since you have come here, I will just ask you this question to explain why I chose you. Firil smirked. You are going to use this match to scare your opponents to be more conscious about you, right? Before our match, it was like 2 versus 3. But if you managed to beat us, you would make your presence known, meaning the hidden member suddenly showed his appearance and became an even bigger presence due to the flashy entrance. Theo widened his eyes, never expecting someone to figure his plan out. This reaction alone was enough for Ellen and Sihan to understand Firil's choice. Why did I choose you? It's simple. I want you to be the brain of this group, creating the plan. What you lack right now is experience. We can provide it for you. Firil then turned to Sihan and Ellen. How about you guys? Before they answered, Theo raised his hand and asked, are you sure that's the only reason? Look, this guy understands me well. Firil grinned and pointed at Theo. Just like you, we're planning to win. Do you remember what I asked and the instructor explained about our training? Theo looked down for a minute before drawing a gasp. It seems you have noticed my plan. That's right. We have a bigger chance to meet Aaliyah's group for the revenge match. Knowing her ability, I'm sure she will climb her way up again, meaning she will win the next 2 matches, or she is not worth our time. Hence, I plan to train you to remove your weakness, which is your lack of experience, within 2 weeks while waiting for Aaliyah to catch up before having another match. This way, we will be able to meet her again and make her our 5th member. I can see that your head is above the rest. Even a third year like Ellen can't understand you. That's why I believe you are a rare catch among first-year students. Rather than letting you rot, I better choose you since Aaliyah has a bigger chance to get you. Firil made an evil smirk as everything was going according to his plan. Ellen and Sihan remained silent as they were impressed by Firil's judgment. They never thought this guy saw that far ahead. I'm honored that you think of me highly, but I'm afraid I will let you down. No need to say it for the time being. I just want to ask whether you're prepared to take down everyone else in the next match or not. Firil asked. Actually, I have just gotten my freedom again. I have 2 skills that are not shown yet. I can only use it after losing once. The 3 of them, including Firil, looked at him in shock. Firil smirked and said, well. What do we have here? I thought I chose gold, but it seemed I found a diamond. Since that is the case, I'm willing. Ellen let out a sigh and rose from the couch, walking to Theo and extending her hand. Nice to meet you, Theodore Griffith. What should I call you? Theo is fine. Aaliyah calls me that too. Theo shook her hand politely. Good. No need to be polite and call me Ellen too. Ah, you should also call this silent guy, Sihan. He is a good guy. Ellen tried to introduce Sihan due to their misunderstanding. Up to this day, Theo must think of Sihan as one of his bullies, so she wanted to cheer up the mood first. Sihan, on the contrary, looked at Theo with an indifferent face. He opened his mouth and said 2 words. Not enough. Ellen made a weird smile and blocked Theo's vision of Sihan, explaining. He is really a good guy, you know. Unbeknownst to them, there was a small smile on Sihan's face as if he was happy with Theo becoming his teammate. Unfortunately, no one saw it. Firil then raised his hand and said cheerfully. Me too. Just call me Firil. Anyway, our plan is to teach you one from Monday to Saturday after school, and we will mentor you together on Sunday. I think this is the best plan to have you understand how to fight an experienced fighter, or a veteran you may say. What do you think? Theo remained silent for a minute before lowering his head, bowing to them since they would be teaching him. Please teach me how to fight. Ellen and Firil smiled while Sihan nodded. Chapter 95, Theo's Talent. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 95. Theo's Talent. That's all. I'm looking forward to working with you, Theo. Firil waved his hand. Yes, thank you very much. Theo couldn't help but remember the first time he met Firil. He was truly annoying. Yet, the same annoying guy actually helped him in getting into this position. He didn't know what to say anymore. Let me have your contact first. I'm going to add you to our group chat. We will discuss everything there. Ellen smiled while taking out her Skylink. Theo nodded, took out his Skylink, and gave his contact. Ellen then added him into the group chat and said, all right. It's done. We can't waste our time too much in this room, so we will give you 1 day to sort everything out since we won't give you any mercy during the next 2 weeks. All the information and who will teach you the next day are to be discussed in the group, okay? Yes. Since they were about to leave, Sihan quickly ended the match and told the system they were leaving, so others could use the room. Then, let's leave. Firil opened the door and came out first, finding Aaliyah and Hantar waiting for them. Oh. There are two people waiting for us outside. Ellen took a peek and made a sly smirk. Aaliyah, what are you doing here? I just left my room too. It's a mere coincidence. Aaliyah looked away. You are missing your guy already. He is not. And I only want to make sure you don't treat him badly. Aaliyah harumphed, walked away, and left one message to them. Just want to let you know. I'm going to get him back no matter what. Ellen only smiled without saying anything. It was the first time she saw Aaliyah acting this way, making her become even more curious of Theo who made such a thing possible. Firil and Sihan surprisingly left first, leaving Ellen and Theo behind. Ellen then said, anyway, no one asked this question, but may I know what the two skills are? You may probably use it in the next match, so why not say it to me first? It's fine if you don't want to answer it though. The answer didn't come immediately, but she still heard it. Well, yeah. I have been thinking about it and I believe it's fine to let you know first. It's Magic Bullet in Clone, replied Theo while turning around, facing her with a serious expression. Seeing his face, Ellen straightened her back as she had a feeling Theo wanted to say something important. Surprisingly, Theo lowered his head again and said, I know that I'm asking too much, but may I ask you to teach me how to control my magic power so I can bend them like what you did? Ellen opened her mouth in amazement. So this is why you are so open to me. Well, I can't promise you anything, but I will do my best to teach you. I see. You are a magic warrior, huh? What is your affinity? I'm sure you can answer this question, right? Just think of it as my payment for teaching you this specific topic which is usually taught in your third year. I have none. Theo decided to answer. As he expected, the school indeed taught all the 5 aspects to the students as it might be the sole reason why all the rich families sent their children to the school instead of taking them to the other side. I see. No affinity. No wonder you have a magic bullet skill. Ellen actually had expected this answer and it was the reason why Theo didn't mind answering. She just wanted to confirm it from his mouth. I understand. I don't think 2 weeks will be enough, but I believe you can do it before the next training session. Thank you. Theo nodded. Then, let's go. Ellen pushed Theo's back as they walked outside. After that, Ellen said goodbye and left Theo alone in the school. Since he finally had the time alone, he couldn't help but hit the wall next to him and closed his eyes with a twisted expression as if he experienced so much pain. No matter how he accepted it, losing was indeed painful, especially when the opponent broke all the tricks he had devised for a long time. He was frustrated. I was lucky to be chosen over Aaliyah. That's all. Theo gritted his teeth and decided to walk to his home. Little did he know his master had been observing him this whole time on the school roof. She watched his reaction with a small smile. No matter whether you are in the business sector or martial arts sector, there will always be a time where you lose or make a wrong decision. I want to teach you the frustration early on. I'm sure that you can overcome it and come back even stronger. Still, learning the basics of 5 aspects in less than 2 months. She closed her eyes and sighed. You may not realize it yourself, but only a genius can do it. Just like a budding flower, you have experienced the barren soil, the fertile soil, or even the right or wrong fertilizer all these years. Now that you have chosen the best soil and fertilizer to grow, it's time for your talent to bloom and show its might to the world. Meanwhile, Theo was oblivious about such a thing and returned to his apartment, feeling dejected. He sighed and thought something when he saw this small apartment and took out the Skylink from his pocket. ID 2801049777610 Name: Theodore Griffith. Balance: 221,800 zil. He got more than 150,000 zils during the hunt with Aaliyah last month and was satisfied with the result. But a thought appeared when he saw his balance. Wait a minute. Since the situation is not that strict, I think it's better to rent a house or an apartment. This way, I can train even when I'm here since the others won't teach me until midnight. It will probably be until school is closed, which gives us around 5 hours. I can still train until midnight while having enough rest for the next day. Theo believed this was the best day to search for one since he wouldn't have enough time for the next 2 weeks. Knowing what to do, Theo quickly opened his Skylink and opened the web for housing while saying to the artificial intelligence who managed it, "Search for an apartment for me." Chapter 96, House. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 96. House. 1 hour after the contact, Theo arrived at the housing agency, where he found a red-haired female waiting for him. She wore the formal black suit outfit and tied her hair into a ponytail so they wouldn't disturb her while maintaining her youthful beauty. When she turned around and found the student that called her earlier, she quickly rose and greeted him, extending her hand. "Hello, sir. I'm Rika, the one on the call earlier." "Ah, yes." Theo shook her hand and asked, "Thank you for receiving me here." Theo didn't even have time to admire the lobby as she had asked him to sit down in the corner to talk. "There are 2 places that meet your criteria. Since we have crossed the apartments out." She opened the file and projected it to the screen in front of them, showing a few pictures. "We only have these 2 houses here. The left one." She continued talking, trying to sell him, but Theo had already found the house he was looking for. The reason Theo didn't go with an apartment was the price, size, and location. Surprisingly, he felt it was better to rent a slightly more expensive house instead of an apartment. The 2 houses had backyards where he could practice with his clone while having enough room to relax inside. The 2 houses were similar in characteristics and appearances, but the one nearer to the school was more expensive, so he needed to plan his finances a bit. After learning them for another 15 minutes, he chose the house near the school since he didn't want to waste so much time traveling just to save a few thousand zills. The stronger he became, the easier it was to get money, thus the choice. "I will take this one." Seeing that Theo chose the more expensive one, she obviously felt happy and smiled more sweetly at him. "I understand. We can go to the house first to check everything." Theo nodded and accepted her invitation. She guided him to the parking lot and stopped in front of a white car. The car design looked the same as the old cars, but there was no wheel below the car as the body touched the ground. Theo came in and waited for Rika to start the engine before the car started floating a few inches above the ground. Rika tried to make conversations with him like how Theo is a student and the reason for purchase, but she soon felt Theo was uncomfortable with it and stopped. Unknown to her, she completely misunderstood Theo. Inside Theo's mind was how he needed to pay 41,200 zills every month. It was a huge leap from his previous rent, but he felt it was money well spent. After all, not only could he get a training field, the house area alone was around 400 square feet. He had planned for the next leap to be a few million zills to buy a house. When they arrived, Rika guided him to all the rooms and asked about his plan to move. She was slightly surprised to hear that Theo wanted to move as quickly as possible, but she still politely discussed the matter with him. Theo paid a few more thousands to prepare the house as quickly as possible, which he could afford to spend. Rika then agreed to the terms and promised he could move in tonight. On the other hand, Theo was satisfied with this house. The backyard was quite big and had enough space needed for him to fight his clone with some small movements. As for the house, it had 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom with a kitchen and living room. Theo wanted to make the first bedroom for sleep while the second was for his control or awareness training. The distance between each house was quite big, so they wouldn't hear the clicking sound of the fight that loud. After reaching an agreement, they went back to the office and finished all the paperwork. Theo then left the building after Rika told him to return at 8 p.m. since everything would be ready by then. ID 2801049777610 Name Theodore Griffith Balance 171,800 zil. Theo agreed and returned to his small apartment while lamenting how 50,000 zils just left his account within hours. But when he entered his room, he realized how small his room was. It was a mere 60 square feet room which was barely enough for one bathroom, one bed, and a table. There were not many things that needed to be brought. Most of them were his clothes which could be fit into one bag. He then used another backpack for all the other things while carrying all his weapons in his other hand. After that, he informed his landlord that he would be moving soon, which the latter agreed and told him he would vacate the room 1 week later since it was the time he needed to pay the rent each month, and wished him luck in his next place. Theo thanked her and headed to his new house, finding everything was ready. Rika had been waiting for him in front of the house and presented all the documents after showing all the things that had been cleaned. He was satisfied, started exploring the new house, and unpacked his items. For the first time, he ordered a bit more expensive food to celebrate his new house. Meanwhile, in Ulrich family mansion, specifically inside a steamy bathroom, Aaliyah tried to relax her body in the bath, yet, her loss in the previous match distracted her the whole time. She was embarrassed, thinking she would be chosen, and asked Theo to get her, but there was one more feeling that hit her the hardest. It was the fact she couldn't see through Theo's problem. No, the worst part might be her hand. She lifted her left hand out of the water and stared at it for a few minutes. If only I used my left hand, I might still be able to turn the situation around. Theo wouldn't have gone to the other team. Her hand was shaking when she recalled the fight, but the frustration surprisingly stopped that thought for a few seconds, to the point the shaking stopped and Aaliyah could clench her hand. Ha, ha. Aaliyah's stuttering laughter echoed in the bathroom. Face-bombed, Aaliyah opened her mouth. How could I not see it this whole time? It seems I'm still not good enough. Chapter 97, Magic Control. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 97. Magic Control. After getting a good rest in the new home with a soft bed unlike the one he had back in the previous apartment, Theo went to school fresher than ever. It was just a normal boring class, but he still listened to everything the teacher said. Time went by, and as soon as he finished all classes, Theo saw a message from Ellen. Theo, I have booked room A.042. Come here. On my way, replied Theo as he quickly made his way toward that room after leaving the class. He returned to the third building and entered the room, finding Ellen waiting for him alone. I will be guiding you today. Ellen smiled and typed a few things on the screen. We will use the same flat field like yesterday. Theo nodded. I have no problem as long as I can get stronger. Haha. I had gotten all the information about you before you fought Lost Lang. To think you are a completely different person right now. I'm impressed. Ellen smirked, telling him she had dug up his information. She didn't want to accidentally slip up, so she told Theo first to avoid any misunderstanding later. She was sure Theo didn't like it, but it was better to know it sooner than later. Theo, on the contrary, had prepared for getting a background check, so he paid no heed. It wasn't like they were in a business relationship either, so he said, Is it wrong to change? Nope. Ellen smiled and continued after checking the screen again. All right. Done. We're good to go. Let's continue our talk inside the virtual world. Theo nodded and entered the training capsule, arriving at the same grass field. He glanced to the side where Ellen appeared and asked, What are we going to do today? Ellen touched her forehead a few times while her body swayed left and right, contemplating their next move. I think I should explain about this moving magic first. Do you know anything about 5 aspects? Theo nodded. Awareness, breathing, control, technique, and endurance. That's good. I don't need to explain from the start. Then you should know what you want to learn is inside the control category, right? Yes. Then, how much do you know about control? I don't know much since I can only summon all 10 magic bullets and shoot them together. As for other knowledge, it's only about releasing my magic power. Ellen paused for a moment and started explaining. There are different types of control. They are soft control, force control, and perfect control. Soft control is the type where you try to convince your magic power. It's the one that you use if you want to release your magic power. You convince them by opening the pores for your magic power to flow and so on. I don't need to explain it anymore since you already understand this one. Then, let's move on to force control. Force control is similar to the soft control, but you let out more magic power than necessary, creating a turbulent flow in your magic power. At that time, you use your skill to help you control the magic power flow. Last but not least, perfect control. At this stage, you can do everything with your magic power. It's every magician's dream to reach this stage. And all those, who reach it, are at least above level 500. Anyway, back to the topic. Which category does my control belong to? It's the beginning of force control. Theo asked, it's only the beginning. Yes. I want to see how good you are in your soft control to see how much magic power you can release at once later. Need to check if you are qualified to learn force control or not. She shrugged and continued, and it's not like my level is that high either in terms of control. Theo nodded. Please teach me. Alright. I will explain the different levels of force control first. In the beginning stage of force control, you are able to program your magic to follow a certain path. For example, I wanted to make my magic turn around or shoot to the sky at a certain range just like what you've experienced. In the next level, you will be able to command them a few times like turn 50 feet to the left before making a turn. After that, you will be able to program them to do complex movements like zig-zag, loops, and so on. And finally, in the last stage, you will be able to program them to a certain command like following a person. After that, it's perfect control, where you have enough control to do everything you want. I won't go too much into details since I will only teach you about the first level of force control. Ellen then raised her hand and summoned 4 ice crystals that killed Theo last time. You remember that I forced the magic to turn around, right? Theo nodded. Yes. Then, I will be fine. Tuning it to force them to turn to the left together. Ellen then inputted a bit of magic power and released the magic. At the same distance where he got hit yesterday, the magic turned to the left and hit the wall in succession. That's it. I can force my magic to move in a certain direction depending on how much magic power I release to my magic. This is like searching for a perfect radio channel with a wheel where you need to rotate it to left and right for fine tuning. And each amount of magic power will result in one direction. You have 2 tasks. You need to do trials and errors to see all the possible movements and perfectly control how much you release in your magic to know where it will turn and such. That's why it's going to take a long time and a lot of practice. Theo took a deep breath and nodded with a serious expression. I will do my best to complete both. Good. I've set so the magic power in your body is unlimited. You can go all day to do this, but I will limit it until the school closes to prevent you from overworking yourself. Ellen then walked backward a few steps and let out the same smile that scared him yesterday. The same smile that seemed to appear only after Ellen figured him out. Before that, let's fight. I want to see your real prowess, so I can give you advice. Chapter 98, Rematch. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 98. Rematch. Theo frowned and took a deep breath. He didn't bring his spear today since he thought he would only learn magic, but since the other party wanted to have a spar, the fight should be hand-to-hand combat with magic. Ellen also didn't have her staff, so he might have a chance. I want you to kill me without holding back, said Ellen while looking at Theo coldly. I really want to see your strength. I hope you can make me see the potential Firil mentioned yesterday. Before Theo could reply, Ellen already raised both hands with her left hand in the front, ready to intercept any attack that came to her. Theo took one step back and prepared himself for the battle. Without any warning, Ellen raised her hand while summoning 3 ice lotuses above Theo's head. You don't expect to let your opponent wait for you, right? Ellen smirked before releasing her killing intent to jolt Theo's mind. Bloom, Ice Lotus. Theo already knew Ellen would do something like this. As the ice lotuses fell from the air, Theo had taken another few steps back, avoiding all 3 lotuses that became his shield against Ellen. Summoning his clone, Theo jumped to the left side while his clone went to the right side. Which one? Ellen muttered while squinting her eyes. Due to her ice lotuses, she didn't know which one was the real him. Luckily, Theo needed at least 3 seconds to reach her with his full speed since they used yesterday's data, giving both of them level 50 status. Ellen summoned 5 head-sized crystals above her head and shot them toward the real Theo. Freezing shot. The ice magic shot like a laser. Facing this attack, Theo ran as quickly as possible and leaped forward, trying his best to avoid this attack without any skill. Unfortunately, one of the freezing shots hit his thigh. He used both hands to land on the grass while his clone stopped and summoned the magic bullets. Ellen narrowed her eyes and turned around, smiling. So, you're the real one. Magic bullet. Clone Theo released all 10 magic bullets with a pinpoint trajectory where all of them would hit Ellen. Seeing this, Ellen simply moved to the right and successfully dodged all those bullets. She then gave another piece of advice. Theo. Even if you're confident with your aim, you should go for a more spread shot. Some may miss, but it's better than no hit at all. With our distance, it's easy for me to avoid, so you should take into account where I go. If you go for a spread, that means I only have 2 options. Either use a shield or jump. That's where you should strike. Clone Theo nodded and shouted, I understand. Unbeknownst to her, right when she started giving the advice, the real him had gotten so much closer despite his injury. Of course. You need to have a clear field of vision. Don't focus on one person alone. Ellen made a smirk and pointed her hand to Theo as if she had predicted him going at her. 4 star-shaped blue lights emerged from the air, shining. Ice Star. Theo frowned, remembered how he got hit by this attack in their match and promised himself to avoid it next time. He used the same tactic as yesterday. He went around the ice stars while maintaining his vision by using his clone's eyes. Surprisingly, the stars didn't turn around anymore, so he thought he was clear to attack her. Clone Theo summoned another wave of magic bullet as cover fire. Magic bullet. No, you won't. Ellen raised her right hand toward Clone Theo before a 10-foot ice wall emerged from the ground, stopping all the magic bullets. At the same time, she used her left hand to use a different skill to the real one. Frost Nova. A blue light emerged from her hand as it flew like a bullet. Theo didn't have a change of expression and seemed to be receiving this attack without being able to do anything. Boom. An explosion occurred as the ice mist produced by the Frost Nova spread around, hiding Ellen inside. Clone Theo used his magic bullet again and tried to aim where Ellen was standing, but he realized he couldn't find her. Before he could release all those bullets, Ellen already released another skill of hers. Ice Wave. It was the same ice wave she used to create a path for her and Sihan to escape from encirclement. Theo released the magic bullets, but all of them hit the ice spikes from the ground. Oh no. The ice wave ultimately arrived at his position and pierced his body in a few different spots. Victory. Ellen smiled. Suddenly, a torrential wind appeared among the mist as Theo emerged from the white ice mist and ran toward Ellen's back while releasing his awareness completely to make his presence bigger. Ellen gulped down as Theo's presence sent a chill down to her spine. Her body became tense and her heart beat rapidly. She glanced at the one she believed as a clone, finding the same elemental shield that blocked Haunter's attack in the first round. Half of the shield was broken while the other half was frozen, but the shield managed to protect Theo from any damage, so it had done its job well. But what made it surprising was the fact that both Theo and his clone could use skills. It was more amazing than any clones she knew. It was at this time, she realized what just happened. Wait a minute. They both can use skills. Then the one that I thought was real. She widened her eyes and drew a gasp, finding the real Theo turned out to be a clone as it disappeared after getting hit by her magic. In other words, Theo had been tricking her since the beginning by letting her hit his leg. And she couldn't react the same way as yesterday since Theo came from her blind spot. She couldn't help but smile while saying, creating layers of tricks, you managed to trick me from the beginning. So, this is the real Theodore Griffith, huh? You are twice if not thrice stronger than yesterday. No wonder Aaliyah chose you. This won't be like yesterday, Theo said in a cold tone and used his monkey fist. With his right hand glowing, his fingers joined together as if it was a spear. He took one step behind Ellen and pierced her heart. Thank you for defeating me yesterday. It's a great help. Is that so? That's good. Ellen closed her eyes while smiling. Stab. Chapter 99, Sihan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 99. Sihan. After killing Ellen, Theo dropped to the ground and spat a mouthful of blood before he realized Ellen still managed to react to his attack and hit his chest with her elbow. If she were a fighter like him instead of a magician, he would have died too. Seriously. Even with all my current power, I can't beat her completely. No, I feel like Ellen is stronger than the assassin leader the Lang family sent. Theo narrowed her eyes and sighed. So, this is what it means to have enough experience and skill. He shook his head helplessly before finding Ellen returning to the field. You should recover first, said Ellen as soon as she met Theo. Theo nodded, closed his eyes, and returned to the real world. A few seconds later, Theo's figure reappeared as he said. I'm good now. I have understood your level and I think you can fight a second. You're equally. In fact, you would have won if you used these two skills in our match. She smiled. Restriction, is it? Yeah. Theo let out a long sigh, feeling disappointed in himself too. Have you ever thought about breaking that restriction yourself? Ellen asked after finding Theo's restriction must come from another person. She wanted to see whether Theo would follow that person blindly or trust himself a bit more. However, Theo's answer changed her opinion. Only during life and death situations. I see. I worry that you trust someone else blindly to the point you would do everything that person instructs you to do. Don't worry. I won't do something like that. Good. Anyway, I have grasped the extent of your control in that magic bullet earlier. I will train you as much as possible, so you will fight both Firil and Sihan for experiences. Make sure you understand your role and how to cope with it. I believe the you 2 weeks later will be a different you. Thanks. Now, let's start our training. Ellen smiled and began explaining her views about Theo's skill. Although Ellen wasn't as good as his master in terms of teaching, her explanation wasn't that hard to understand and Theo managed to absorb all the knowledge she gave. It was the start of his trials and errors. Ellen kept watching him while offering some suggestions when he was confused. This never happened when he was with Aaliyah since they both focused on hunting instead of training. Of course, Theo was grateful to Aaliyah since he leveled up so much during that 1 month. Surprisingly, Ellen didn't teach him force control alone. She also provided some guidance about soft control and magicians in general. The time went by in an instant and Theo had no choice other than to go home. Now that he had a house and a backyard, going home felt like a blessing to him since he could relax and train whenever he wanted. The next day, Theo received an invite from Firil. His training was practically simple since they kept doing one-on-one from start to finish. Theo kept losing one after another because he only used his clone to fight Firil, not his magic bullet yet. He believed it wasn't the right time to tell him he was Joker. What Firil taught him in this training was how to fight assassins. After all, he learned that Theo had never actually killed an experienced one like them. Of course, Firil already told him to bring his spear with him since they would fight at least 100 battles today. Despite getting killed continuously, Theo's eyes didn't lose their light. He kept looking ahead, learning as much as possible. Firil even sucked a cold breath when everything Theo did was reading his movements. He always asked at least 10 questions about their fight with one same line. Why did you move this way? This one question could be answered by different reasons depending on how he moved. When Firil asked him about his obsession for understanding each movement, Theo simply answered him with, I don't have much time to practice, so it's better to understand it and see what move I can use to counter it. There was a risk of being too repetitive, but Theo promised Firil not to stick to one pattern. The one thing that kept Firil from questioning him was how he proved himself to Firil by showing a few different attack patterns to counter one movement. After getting Firil's seal of approval, they kept sparring for tens if not hundreds of battles. Theo had gotten used to his death since he didn't feel any pain inside this virtual world. His footwork, spear technique, and breathing improved tremendously. He gradually polished his footwork and made some changes to make himself comfortable since repetitive footwork would just become a target to take advantage of. The same applied to his spear technique. The length of his hands and the size of his palms started adjusting as Theo searched for their own comfortable positions from half an inch to an inch and so on. He was pretty satisfied with the 2 days of progress. When he thought all the past 2 weeks would pass by quietly, he was wrong. The moment he opened the door where he was supposed to meet Sihan, the latter gazed at him coldly. Theo fell silent for a few seconds in front of the door before lowering his head. No matter what, Sihan would be teaching him, so he needed to be polite. There was no shame to lower one's head to the one who taught you. Nice to meet you. Before letting him sit or enter the capsule, Sihan pointed his hand to the wall in front of him as if telling him to stand there. Frowning, Theo walked carefully and asked, May I know what you would like to say? His tone was cold since he didn't like Sihan either despite respecting him as his mentor. He didn't forget the fact that Sihan also bullied him. Theodore Griffith. Sihan called his name and paused for a minute while closing his eyes, steeling his resolve. He took a deep breath, rested his arms on top of his thighs and continued with a question. Do you know why I bullied you? Chapter 100, Theo vs. Sihan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 100. Theo vs. Sihan. Do you know why I bullied you? That question stuck in his mind as Theo stared at Sihan with his mouth open. There was no change in Sihan's expression, so he didn't know why he talked about this. But since the latter asked him, he answered with whatever he experienced. For me to get stronger and fight back the bullies myself. Sihan shook his head while closing his eyes as if it was the last thing he considered to bully him. Theo's heart beat rapidly, filled with displease. I have several reasons, but I guess one of them is due to a certain man. A certain man. Theo narrowed his eyes. Edward Griffith. Theo widened his eyes and drew a gasp before he pointed his spear towards Sihan. Who? No need to point your spear at me. You won't get any answer with it. Sihan shrugged. He simply rose from the couch and said coldly, if you want to know something about him, beat me. I will only tell you a clue after you beat me. Without caring about Theo's spear, Sihan entered the training capsule and activated it. On the contrary, Theo was panting. He didn't know if this was fatigue, anger, or something else, but indescribable things filled his heart. He took a few deep breaths to calm his heart, but the scene where Sihan mentioned his brother's name kept flashing in his eyes. He is related to my brother. Theo clenched his fists. His thought was in disarray. Did my brother know him? Did my brother ask him to bully me? Does he know the pocket watch my brother gave me? There were many unanswered questions in his mind, but Theo understood no answer would come unless he beat Sihon. Instead of going to the virtual world in this state, he decided to sit and calm his mind down first. No need to sort out his thoughts since he distracted himself with another goal. It took him 2 minutes before Theo rose from the couch and entered the training capsule. He soon found Sihon with his sword and shield several feet away from him. Despite believing he had calmed down, the uncertainty in his heart started increasing and filling his heart. As long as you can kill me, I will give you the answer. Sihon raised his sword, pointing it at Theo's neck. Theo summoned his clone and handed the spear while he planned to stay in the back. Sihon squinted his eyes before looking at how the clone and Theo himself went in a different direction. Suddenly, Theo raised his hand and summoned his magic bullet, releasing it on Sihon and spreading them a bit more according to Ellen's advice. Magic bullet. Seeing these magic bullets, Sihon stomped the ground and pushed forward, taking the full brunt of his attack. Of course, only 4 of them hit his shield since Theo spread it. Even if he concentrated those bullets to one spot, Sihon only needed to take 1 step to the side and avoided it completely, so the magic bullet earlier was for a distraction. His clone took that split second and ran forward while Theo kept walking closer but not too close. Clone Theo activated the focused charge and haste. Sihon decided to play with his clone, who happened to have the ability to use skills, and charged forward. Clone Theo thrust the spear, but Sihon leaned to the right to avoid it instead of blocking the spear with his shield. Circular blade. His sword started glowing as he slashed his sword to kill the clone, but the latter summoned the elemental shield to stop that strike. Sihon remained silent before noticing the real Theo had positioned himself in the opposite direction, launching the magic bullet. Unfortunately for him, Sihon had seen it a mile away and blocked another 4 bullets with his shield. Yet, Theo smiled when he saw this development. What he wanted the whole time was to seal Sihon's movement. With clone Theo sealing the front side and magic bullet blocking the area behind him, Sihon could only escape to the air or go to the right since clone Theo was on his left. Sihon chose the right, but his neck was stopped by the spear he dodged earlier and it would also hit his shoulder if he jumped right now. Hence, he had no way to go. This was how Theo had changed his attack pattern after learning from Ellen and Firil. The real Theo ran forward before leaping to the air, summoning another wave of magic bullets. His clone, on the other hand, tried to strike Sihon's neck. The magic bullet then rained them down, but most of them only hit the ground, kicking up the dust that turned into a smokescreen. But this was the ultimate mistake Theo made in this fight. Emerging ground. Right before the spear hit, Sihon stomped the ground as the ground in front of him rose and launched clone Theo to the air. Predicting such a thing might happen, clone Theo tossed the spear to the real Theo in the air. Catching the spear, Theo fixed his grip in less than a second before he thrust his spear. It's a good plan, but you shouldn't throw your spear because I can find your position. Sihon noticed Theo's presence behind him by looking at the trajectory. With his hand in the rest position after the elemental shield disappeared, it shouldn't be possible to hit him unless he turned around. However, Sihon went 1 step further to show Theo their difference in strength. He gently tossed his sword next to his waist until it reached his chest level. Meanwhile, his hand had rotated clockwise as he grabbed his sword without even looking, slashing his sword. Theo couldn't even react as he simply twisted his body to the right while Sihon claimed his right hand. If there were another person before him, Sihon would have continued that swing to hit the second person. But since he only fought Theo, Sihon deliberately turned around and struck Theo with his shield. Shield charge. Theo raised his grip, almost reaching the blade while using his foot to step on the handle to stop that shield. In other words, Theo used 1 hand and 1 foot to push the spear's handle. Unfortunately, that was what exactly Sihon was aiming for. With him getting thrown out of balance, 1 swing of his shield would launch him to the ground. And at this time, Sihon moved with his fastest speed and beheaded Theo before he regained his ground. This is over.